difficult to trade him, and so it just became this stalemate, which is not what Miami was wanting. But their only other alternative would have been to not take him and to release him, and then they would have been into 2019 getting a comp pick, which being estimated would be a third or fourth round pick.
Hey Chad, okay, I found out what the problem was. So apparently apparently everything that we just said for the past 10 minutes or so did not go through.
Okay, that's fine.
So let's start over. Welcome everybody to another episode. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and just we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna just hit reset. Okay, everybody, we apologize for the slight technical difficulty, and so we're gonna just go ahead and move on and just talk about what we've already been talking about, and that, of course, is Jarvis Landry and the trade and the compensation that the Dolphins got for him, a 4th round pick for this year and a 7th round pick for next year. So like let's summarize what it was that we'd already basically said. It was that the Dolphins should have probably gotten him last year, and they didn't, and maybe that might have made it go down, and it didn't. Now Jarvis Landry is going to go to Cleveland, and the Dolphins got what they could for him. And you know what? Yeah, you know what, Chad? Personally, and again, we had said this in the first 10 minutes before we had ourselves an issue, but he's a slot receiver. He's not a number 1 receiver. He's not Antonio Brown, not Julio Jones, not AJ Green, not whoever were those guys you want to bring up. And every time we tried to get him to be a boundary wide receiver, which is normally what those guys are, it didn't work out. Most of what he did was in the slot, and we had to get him free releases. He wasn't terrific as a route runner. He was incredibly dangerous when he got the ball in his hands. But other than that, he wasn't that kind of a player to earn $16 million a year or $14 million a year. And this is what I had mentioned before, was that if most teams valued him at $11 million, then $13 million, which was the Dolphins offer per year, was generous. That's a generous offer for somebody like him. But Landry thought he was worth more than that. And this is ultimately what it boils down to. I'm very interested in seeing if Cleveland can get him to a long-term deal and exactly how much money they're going to pay him to stay there for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I don't know. So Cleveland gave up the draft picks, so it'll be interesting. So that was part of the equation. Was you're asking a lot to. He was asking to be one of the higher paid receivers in the league, one, and then you're also having to give up whatever Miami wanted in picks. And so it created a stalemate that there were very, very few teams that were interested in making that trade. And I suspect Miami came down. I think their goal was probably when they tagged him to try to get at least a 2nd round pick for him rather than just release him and then try to get a comp pick next year. And so, again, assuming this is Cleveland's original 4th round pick, I haven't verified that, but if that's the case, you're getting the first pick in the 4th round, which is going to be very comparable to what they would have gotten a year later for comp. And so you're throwing a 7th round pick in. So what I see is Miami got slightly more than they would have gotten in if they had just released him, which isn't what anybody wants. I don't believe that Landry's just a slot receiver. I think he's one of the best slot receivers. He's also a very reliable punt returner, which is important. And they also used him in different formations out of the backfield. So losing him is tough, but the reality is every team is in a different situation. And, as I covered, I'll cover them again. Right now, Miami's, depending on what they do with Jesse Davis, either way, if they don't re-sign Juwan James, they need a starting offensive guard or a starting offensive tackle, and they have no backup offensive tackle. That Sam Young is not under contract, so if they were to re-sign him as a backup, they've got to negotiate that with him. Cody Parkey is not under contract. We got to sign our kicker. We do not have any real backup running back for Kenyon Drake right now to split carries with or to be reliable if he gets hurt. We don't have a backup quarterback. That's a huge thing. We don't have a starting, either weak side or strong side linebacker, depending where you put Kiko Alonso and McMillan. The list goes on and on of things. We don't have who's our third safety. I don't believe Michael Thomas is under contract anymore. So there's so many holes to fill right now. And with Miami's position right now in the salary cap, they simply could not afford to pay a slot receiver that amount of money. And I still suspect there's going to be some more cuts. I think the obvious ones are Julius Thomas is going, and Timmons is going. Those are going to be two people that are going that we're going to need to fill those positions in the draft or free agency. But you're still looking out there. We're paying $9 million to Pouncey. I think that's way over his market if he were released. So I'm hoping that they may work out a little bit with Mike Pouncey to free up some salary cap space, and we have to decide what's going on with Cameron Wake. I'm all for Cam Wake being teamed with Quinn, but that basically just means you drafted a number 1 pick last year, and you're gonna, for a second year in a row, just put him on the bench. And so there's a lot of moves that have to be made yet, and Landry's had just become that situation where it had to be done. We were not in a position to pay our slot receiver $16 million. And again, repeating what I said earlier, I think with Kenyon Drake, Kenyon Drake's a lot more of a dynamic player than Ajayi was. So I think you'll see some of those dump offs you'd see out of the backfield to Landry. I think you can replicate that by getting that ball in Drake's hands. And in all honesty, Landry was a very physical wide receiver, but he's nowhere, in my mind, capable of taking it to the house the way Drake is. And so that's not necessarily going to be a bad thing to put the ball in Drake's hands a little bit more. In some way, shape, or form, they are going to get an upgrade at the tight end position. If Miami can get a dangerous tight end between a new tight end and Drake, and working in whoever they do in the slot, whether they draft a receiver or they try to work in what they have, I don't think it's going to be that impossible for Gase to replace the production that Landry was giving them. Again, I don't like seeing him go, but you have to make tough decisions when you have players that aren't playing marquee positions. I mean, it's not like offensive tackle or quarterback or defensive tackle where those players get those huge contracts. That's just what the market is for them. Slot receivers markets are not that high. And, quite honestly, if you go down the list of free agent slot receivers available or look at the capability to maybe fill one in the draft, it's one of the easier positions. I mean, relatively anyway, the easier positions to fill. Not that it's easy to replace Jarvis Landry, but the position he primarily played is not as hard to fill compared to a lot of their positions.
And actually, right now, the Dolphins media are talking to Jarvis Landry right now at his cystic fibrosis charity event. He says that he is excited for the next chapter of his life, and he gave it his all, and he's happy about how it all turned out. And, good luck to him, but I'm starting now. There's more information coming out about the trade, Chad, and apparently Cleveland had 2 fourth-round picks, pick number 101 and pick number 123. I'm going to give you 2 guesses which one the Dolphins got.
Based on your tone, I'm guessing 123. So knowing that, to me, they basically got the equivalent of releasing him, except you're getting that pick a year early, which has significant value, and you are getting the second pick, even though it's a 7th rounder. It depends how you look at it. It's a little more value than I think the comp picks are usually the end of the round. I could be wrong on that.
It is the end of the round, but a comp pick at the bottom of the 3rd is better than a 4th round pick at the bottom of the 4th.
Well, you're also getting the 7th thrown in, and you're getting the year moved up. So to me, that's a fairly comparable scenario to releasing them. So what that tells me is the market just wasn't there for the Dolphins to get the trade they wanted to, but they accomplished the same thing. And again, as I was pointing out earlier too, Miami was able to control his destination. I think the New York Jets would have been a heavy player in trying to get Jarvis Landry, in particular if they don't get Cousins signed. They have a lot of cap space, and they desperately need wide receivers. And I would much rather see Jarvis Landry go to the Browns than go to the Jets and have to face him twice a year with a chip on his shoulder. So, it's not a great deal. I think, not letting the Dolphins off the hook. I know Landry took a lot of heat for his demands, but the reality is Miami chose to, let him play under his final year of his contract, this last year, and they chose to sign Jay Cutler. If you don't sign Jay Cutler, that $10 million probably bridges the gap to get Landry signed, and that was the decision they made, and this is the aftermath. Is they just couldn't afford to keep him.
Yep, pretty much. I don't know, man. It kind of hurts knowing that it's the late fourth rounder, and I understand that a lot of Dolphins fans right now are, I guess, justifiably upset over this because this is not what they wanted. And we have a lot of guys in the chat asking questions right now. This is kind of off topic of Jarvis, so Corey McKee, we will get to your questions later on, but we're gonna discuss the Landry thing up to this point. We have some hashtag PhinManiacs Live on Twitter. Again, if you want to tweet at us at hashtag PhinManiacs Live, we will get to those questions now. And of course, you can call in at 954-376-5704. We'll be taking callers all night long. Feel free to vent your frustrations in a family-friendly tone, of course. Anyway, so Simon W, hashtag PhinManiacs Live. Do you think Dolphins front office have a plan on how to build a team, or are they just flipping coins? Is there any upside to the Jarvis deal?
No, to be honest, I don't see a lot of upside to the Jarvis deal. I think, again, you have to look at this from a year ago to where we are now. And when Jarvis Landry hit free agency and they tagged him, Jarvis was not going to back down off his salary demands, and this was all there was left that we could do. Right now our team is very heavy on salary cap, and so your choice is you start cutting a lot of people and creating a lot more holes, or you do that. So it is what it is. I guess that's the best way I can say it. Is I don't think it's a positive thing, but I think the front office did what they could. You just, in the end, we ended up with a player that does not play a high salary position.
Yeah, I get you, man. And the question is there any upside? Now, you say no, but I personally feel like it's not as bad as people are saying. I just mentioned that I'm a little disappointed that it was the late fourth rounder that we got from Cleveland, but at the same time, again, this is the situation that we're in, and I'm not trying to act like I know better than everybody else by saying this or nothing like that, but I am of the mindset that a lot of Jarvis's production came from the simple fact that he just got the ball a lot. It was always checkdowns. It was always quick throws to Landry because we couldn't afford to do anything else. And every time we tried to do Landry somewhere else other than the slot with a quick throw, it didn't work. When we tried to screen it to Landry, it didn't work because there was no blocking. The only time it ever worked on screens was when Landry was blocking. And I imagine that Landry would have preferred to have the ball in his hands. Unfortunately, that doesn't help much on screens because if Landry has the ball, he can't block for himself. So again, a lot of the situation is that Landry just got fed a lot, and that's why he got the record for most catches in his first 4 seasons, because he just got the ball over and over and over and over. And there is numbers out there. I don't know where I found the statistics. I remember somebody tweeting it out though. I think it was like it had to do with the number of catches Landry got per game correlated with what the results of the game was. Because if Landry got more than something like 7 catches per game, more often than not, the Dolphins actually lost that game. Why? Because that probably meant that they weren't able to do anything else besides get the ball to Landry over and over and over. If the offense is not balanced, then that means that they're not doing well. Getting the ball to Landry over and over correlates to nobody else is doing anything. You can't get the ball to Kenny Stills. Can't get the ball to Devontae Parker. Can't get the ball to the running backs. The only one who's effective is Landry in the slot. Then that means the offense is not doing well. When Landry gets less than 7 catches, we won more because that meant that the whole offense was functioning. I'm not trying to say that's Landry's fault. Far from it, in fact. I feel like Landry helped that more than he hurt it. But at the same time, Landry was like almost a security blanket. Landry was the guy you went to every time something was going wrong, and more often than not, something was going wrong. So why can't you build a team around these guys? That's another question the front office is going to have to answer for. I think that the fact that Ryan Tannehill was missing for 2017 had a lot to do with what happened. And I am not going to stand here and say that the Dolphins are better off without Jarvis Landry. I don't believe that for 1 second. But this is the distinction that has to be made. I don't feel that the Dolphins are crippled without Jarvis Landry. And I know you disagree with me on this, Chad, because we've had this discussion before, but I feel like the Dolphins have talent at the wide receiver position that is just waiting to prove themselves. Your argument is that Jarvis has already proved himself and we shouldn't be letting our good players get away. I can agree with that logic. But just because Landry already proved himself does not mean that we can't let other players prove themselves. The only other options in that regard would be that we would have to ship out Kenny Stills, which was not going to happen, and we are not going to be able to move on from Devontae Parker just yet because he's still there and he's still doing things, and even though he hasn't really shown much, he still technically offers things that Landry does not, which is size and which is boundary ability, which Landry did not have. So there is that. Now, if you have Jakeem Grant, who is an incredible weapon, and in a lot of regards is kind of like Landry, like even though he's small, he's not afraid to get physical, though I would prefer if he didn't. He's definitely faster than Landry. He's about as slippery as Landry. So a lot of the things that Jakeem Grant does well, Landry was something that he also did well. I don't think Grant can block as well as Landry, but again, that old adage that speed kills. Now, with Grant as the next guy up, I believe it will be him, not Leonte Carew, like a lot of people keep saying. I think the main problem that Dolphins fans have is that they immediately look to, okay, well, who's the next highest draft pick that's on the roster? So in that case, it would be Leonte Carew. But a lot of times, that draft pick is not necessarily the most talented guy on the roster. I think Leonte Carew is not who we hoped he would be, and I don't think he will ever be. I think Rashawn Scott is more talented. I think Isaiah Ford might arguably be more talented. And I definitely think Jakeem Grant is more talented, even though he's a lot smaller. So why does everybody default to Carew? It's because of the draft pick situation. And I get that. Corey McKee, we need a rebound player to get over Landry, kind of like a recent breakup with an ex-girlfriend. Again, I still feel like that it's in-house. I don't think we need to spend a ton of draft picks at wide receiver. We've been accumulating wide receiver draft picks for the past 2 or 3 years. And ultimately, it's meant nothing because we've always had Kenny Stills, Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker. It's like that. Those 3 guys right there are the very reason. And Corey McKee mentions Drew Morgan. Okay, fine. If you want to bring in Drew Morgan, even though I wasn't really impressed with Drew Morgan, I still think Grant has more to offer as a weapon. If you want to talk strictly on if he was reliable or not, fine, Drew Morgan. But I don't think he's like this athletic superstar that we hope. We can replace Landry's production, I feel like. I feel like that without Landry, now the offense is going to have to actually get creative. You can't just rely on Landry. This is going to be a real test of Adam Gase's offensive production. This is going to be a real test of Gase's so-called genius. We can figure out now what can Gase do to replace Landry's production. Are we going to throw the ball out of the backfield more? Are we going to find ways to get the running backs to be lined up as receivers with Drake? I think I would be all for that. I would love to be able to do that. Maybe we can finally get our hands on a good tight end. There's a few good ones in the draft upcoming this year. Mike Gesicki, Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert. There's a lot of guys there. And ultimately, whether this has any upside or not, whether the Dolphins have a plan or not, I don't know if they necessarily have a plan that we can see. I believe they have some sort of plan, but maybe the plan isn't one that makes sense to us. Now, I'm not going to stand here and be like, oh, we're just dumb Twitter GMs. What the heck do we know? Because a lot of guys on Twitter are actually more educated than we give credit for. I'm sorry, they just are. And who knows, maybe we really are smarter than those guys. But at the same time, just because our plan is not the one they pick doesn't mean that the plan won't work for them. I believe the Dolphins do have a plan. Maybe it's not a good one, but I believe they have a plan. So the question is not whether do they have a plan. The question is, do they have a good plan? We can't say for sure yet because we don't know what the plan is. I would like to believe they have some idea of what they're doing. Trading Jarvis Landry is not the end-all, be-all. It's not like we traded Tom Brady. It's not like we traded somebody like Ndamukong Suh, which is a rumor, but I doubt that's going to happen because nobody's going to take that contract for sure. And it's not like we traded the best wide receiver in football. He was the best wide receiver in terms of production on the Dolphins, but he's not this superstar elite wide receiver who changes games and makes things happen that no other receiver does. If he was, we wouldn't constantly be fighting to get into the playoffs. We would probably be getting into the playoffs. Not having a wide receiver superstar can make or break a season. When Julio Jones and AJ Green are out, their quarterbacks suffer. especially in the case of the Bengals, because without A.J. Green, Andy Dalton has issues. Okay? Andy Dalton is supposedly the Red Rocket. He's the superstar quarterback, except when A.J. Green's not around, and then things kind of start to flop a little bit for him. So Landry is not that kind of a guy. I believe the Dolphins do have a plan, and I've always said that I don't think they're as far away as people think they are. So I don't think this season is down the tubes just because Jarvis Landry was traded. That's just my thoughts on it. So Orlando Gonzalez, he does hashtag PhinManiacs Live, wants to ask if Landry's getting traded for the 4th and the 7th next year, do we still get a comp pick if he signs long-term with Cleveland aside from the picks we acquired? The answer to that is no. When Jarvis Landry signed that franchise tag, any hopes of a comp pick was out the window. The way the compensatory picks work is that if the Dolphins let Landry walk and they don't get very active in free agency, that would mean that they would probably get a 3rd-round compensatory pick for the fact that they didn't get anybody to really replace Landry. That's how it works. Now, if the Dolphins even if the Dolphins let Landry go and they didn't get anything, and if they didn't get any picks for him in a trade, but the Dolphins were still really active in free agency, which Armando Salguero says they will be, then that would mean that if the Dolphins were really active in free agency, then the guys that they brought in would outweigh what Jarvis's departure would be, and they wouldn't get that comp pick anyway. So comp picks only count if players leave for nothing. Since we got a trade for Jarvis, that means that we don't get a comp pick. I'm sorry. And again, we can have the debate about whether the comp pick would have been better than what the Dolphins got for Landry or not. But ultimately, it boils down to what are the Dolphins going to do with those picks? Now, a lot of people are saying that we really need to get our hands on Baker Mayfield. Let's see. It was Corey McKee again in the chat for PhinManiacs. I feel we can only get Mayfield by moving top 3. Okay, Chad, I guess we're going to talk about this now. Again, I am not rabid over Baker Mayfield. And we've had this discussion in our group message on Twitter about Baker Mayfield, and I'm not going to go into all that and about what I feel about that. But I am not foaming at the mouth at the idea of Baker Mayfield. I'm just not. I still feel like Ryan Tannehill is the franchise quarterback the Dolphins need. Every time he gets in there, he does better and better. Now, I guess and look, I'll admit, I have some emotional attachment to Ryan Tannehill. I like the guy, and I think that he deserves a lot more credit than he's given, and I kind of relate to that almost. But in pure football terms, let's say that Tannehill does well in 2018 and they draft Baker Mayfield. It pains me to even say it like this. But if they decided to go this route, if Landry does well in 2018 and they drafted Mayfield the year before, they could conceivably trade Tannehill for some high picks in 2019 and let Mayfield go then. I would be heartbroken over it, but that's something that they could do. So I don't know your thoughts on that.
To me, it's a completely separate issue with Tannehill and Baker Mayfield. I don't think in the NFL it's wise to bet on a rookie at the quarterback position, and I view Tannehill as a decent quarterback, and so getting rid of a decent quarterback is not wise. I mean, all you have to do is look at the free agent market right now and look at the names being thrown around like Case Keenum. The Browns traded for Tyrod Taylor, Kirk Cousins, and I don't believe any of those guys are any better than.
Well, I'm talking about after 2018, Chad. The idea is that after 2018 goes by, if Tannehill does a great job and he does really well and it drives up the value for him, could the Dolphins trade him after that?
No, absolutely not. You don't. It's in the NFL, the best way to consistently win is to have a good quarterback. And so, to me, Miami needs to draft a quarterback. I'm not really sold on anybody at this time. I don't see a clear-cut prospect that's the number one, and I think that's what you're seeing in all these mocks is who is the clear-cut number one quarterback. And they all have different skill sets and talents, and Miami's in this situation is in a good position because they have a decent quarterback on their team. They're not like the Jets right now where they don't have a starting quarterback. They're not like the Buffalo Bills right now where they don't have a starting quarterback. The Cardinals don't have a starting quarterback. The Broncos really don't have a starting quarterback. And so there's these teams out there desperate for a starter. And Miami's in a position where you can bring a guy in and just have him compete with Ryan Tannehill. And if Ryan Tannehill has a very good 2018 season, then you just have a quality, talented guy backing him up in case he gets hurt. And, in maybe 3 or 4 years, you might be looking at having developed that guy, and you may extend him and make him your starter when Tannehill's 33 or 34. Or you may, if Tannehill gets beat out, let's just say Tannehill gets beat out, then maybe next year you do look at trading, or maybe even this year before the trading deadline, you look at Tannehill getting traded. But I don't think under any circumstance do you trade Tannehill until you've got a rookie in here you feel really good about. And so to me, you definitely have to take that shot. And it really all comes down to Adam Gase, whether you like Rosen, or you like Allen, or you want Mayfield, or you want Lamar Jackson, any of those guys. It's going to come down to who does Adam Gase want. And if Adam Gase has looked at all those quarterbacks and he's identified one he really wants, if it's Rosen or Mayfield, they may need to consider moving up if they want to secure him. If he's not set on any of those guys, or he's okay with a mix of them, then you can kind of sit back at 11. But I think for Greer and Tannenbaum, you've got to get that quarterback above any other position, because Miami doesn't have a backup right now for one. With Tannehill being 30 and with having the knee issues, I just can't see it making sense to bring in some old veteran behind him. That's just what good did Jay Cutler do us? What good did Matt Moore do us when Ryan Tannehill got hurt? And I want a guy that competes with Ryan Tannehill as a franchise quarterback, because you can do okay with a decent quarterback, and Tannehill absolutely is decent, and maybe he's going to progress very well this year. That would be a great thing. But if he doesn't, and I've used this isn't the perfect parallel, but I use the deal. In 1982, Miami just went to the Super Bowl with David Woodley being a quarterback, and they drafted Marino. And so if you have a conviction about a quarterback in this draft and you can get him, you have to go get him. And you can solve other positions all sorts of ways, but it's just so hard to get your hands on a franchise quarterback. So if you want my general opinion, historically, most teams, including the Dolphins, don't make it that obvious how bad they want something. And there has been this man crush being reported going around of how much Gase and Mayfield liked each other. But that just seems odd to me, because that's just cueing anybody else in that wants Baker Mayfield that they've got to jump ahead of the Dolphins to make sure they get him. So my gut feeling is that isn't the quarterback the Dolphins are targeting. I don't really even know that they're targeting quarterback with that 11th overall pick. It's not just those 3 or 4 guys. This is a pretty deep quarterback draft, and again, Miami's in a position that they don't have to draft a guy to bring him in to play him right away. You can bring a backup in and go a couple seasons. And so I feel like Baker Mayfield probably wouldn't be the best fit, not because of his ability, but just because, if you've listened to him interview, he's extremely cocky, very cocky. And so I like that trait in my quarterback, but I just don't see Baker Mayfield coming in and doing well sitting on the bench a couple of years, which may be the case with Tannehill. I think, maybe Lamar Jackson might be a better fit. I don't think Lamar Jackson is somebody you can draft and put right out on the field and start him. I think he would do really well to work with Gase a year or two. I think Lamar Jackson, when you look at what he can do running the football, might be able to be a little bit more of a dangerous quarterback than any of them. He has a couple years to learn behind Gase and Tannehill. You could really turn him into something special, or maybe one of these other guys that are the 6th or 7th rated quarterback. Those are still pretty high rated guys in this draft because there's so many quarterbacks. But bottom line is, I believe Miami has got to get a young quarterback that they're developing right now. And that's the whole situation we got into last year with Jay Cutler and Matt Moore, is we have not taken that draft pick to get that young guy. And you really hope that, when you're spending $11 million on Robert Quinn, that your intent isn't to be drafted near the top 10 next year. And you've got to chase those quarterbacks and grab one when you can. I don't feel Ryan Tannehill is good enough to not bring in another quarterback that, might be an elite guy that might be better than Tannehill. I think you have to bring in another guy to compete with him, and in a year or two, then you figure out who's the best of the two.
Agreed. Like I said, man, my attachment to Tannehill is more emotional than anything. Like I feel like I relate to the guy. He's not this. Everybody talks about how being cocky is like this competitive edge, and every great quarterback has that almost mean streak about them. And I'm like, why? Why does being nasty mean that you're going to succeed in football? Like, I understand that it's a rough sport, but why can't, like, so many players get into trouble because of their so-called mean streak. So many players get into trouble because these guys don't know how to control themselves off the field, and they come off as condescending or superior to us. And I don't feel like that is necessary to be a good quarterback, but that's just me. I'm probably in the minority thinking that, but that's fine. I'm not going to go into a long diatribe about it. Let's see. McLaren08 in the chat. Do you think that Gase is starting to mold his roster to his liking, shipping Ajayi, Landry, etc.? I feel like he didn't have much input year one. Okay. I feel like that Gase basically, I don't know so much if it was his input that he didn't have. I think it was more along the lines of he wanted to see what he had in year one before he decided to just go ahead and start shipping people out. Like, he tried at first to make it work with Jay Ajayi. We know the whole story. Jay Ajayi was basically the projected starter at running back. He got himself a little too big for his britches, and Gase decided that this guy needs to have his ego deflated, so he benched him for Arian Foster. Gase did not choose Arian Foster over Jay Ajayi. Gase brought in Arian Foster and made him start because Jay Ajayi was going around acting like he was the best of the best. And supposedly he had learned his lesson after somewhere near midseason, and Ajayi started getting the ball a lot more, and he delivered on that. So everybody now saw Jay Ajayi as the star running back. Well, what happened? He started getting too big for his britches again, and now with Jay Cutler at quarterback instead of Ryan Tannehill, the passing game was severely depleted. So ultimately, Ajayi started to fall off, and Ajayi started complaining again because the Dolphins weren't doing well, and all blah 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 blah. He wasn't doing individual performance well, and the team wasn't doing well as a whole. So he was complaining and he was blaming the coaches, and he hates Adam Gase now, and he takes shots at Adam Gase. And Gase had him shipped out for a fourth rounder, and everybody's mad at the Dolphins for doing that because Ajayi was our star running back. Never mind the fact that Kenyon Drake technically did a lot better than Ajayi did after he got in there, but that's fine, whatever. Now Landry has a lot of, let's say, Ajayi-like traits. He tends to think that he knows better a lot. He's not as he doesn't come off as petty as Jay Ajayi, but he has that same, I don't know, that same idea of if I had the ball more, then we would do better. But Landry already had the ball a lot, so I mean, what was the point? Ultimately, this is what I feel like. Jay Ajayi and Jarvis Landry both argued with Adam Gase over how he was doing things. So Adam Gase had them shipped out. Sometimes the best players are the ones who are the diva players, and nobody, quote unquote, likes a diva unless you're a quarterback. That's the only time you can get away with it. But I feel like this roster can work with what is being built. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. And actually, not to go too off topic, but Chad, it was just last week that Brandon Howard came on our show and basically said that Jay Ajayi was doing things that he really shouldn't have been doing. You know what it was he said. He was talking about how even though the coach had said somebody else to go in there, Ajayi would wave them off and basically not let them go into the game. Well, if Ajayi's already on the field and he refuses to get off, what's the running back going to do? Fight with him on the field and let the clock run out? Ridiculous. So the only thing that could be done was that the running back that Gase ordered in stays on the sidelines and basically goes over to coach and says, "Coach, he's not letting me get in there." And so, of course, Ajayi and Gase would have to butt heads over this. Now, it's kind of crazy because nobody's actually reported that specific incident besides Brandon, but apparently Brandon saw something that everybody else didn't. And since he goes to the games, that's not too unfeasible. It's hard to justify what Ajayi is saying. Ajayi is basically saying, I am going to take every rep. I am going to do everything for this team because I am the best running back by far, and nobody else comes close. That's basically what it sounds like he's saying. Now, Jarvis doesn't come off the same way, but Jarvis does overestimate his overall value. Jarvis wanted $14 million or more. Teams thought he was worth 11, and that piles up. Because if you get a... Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Jarvis, to me, is a quite a bit different player than Ajayi, but kind of touching on all the things you guys are talking about, in answer to the question, absolutely, I think from the moment he came here, this has been Gase's show. I'm pretty sure Tannenbaum and Greer go to Gase, and Gase tells him what he wants, and I think he is the power on the team right now. I don't think Tannenbaum or Greer have much power over Gase, and he's running the show, and I'm glad for that because he's the one who's putting the players in position and coaching them. I think Gase is the primary reason the last two drafts have not been that bad. You know, one thing Miami's accomplished is they've been able to actually get contributing players in the middle round. You know, when you think about players like Drake and Tankersley, Godshaw, Miami's actually getting players that make the team and play in the middle of the round. So I think Gase is doing a pretty good job of building the team. Gase, he's kind of an iron fist guy, which I think you need. I think Joe Philbin was so wishy-washy. I don't know if he would have known what to do with the players that are like that. And Gase doesn't mess around. If you're not producing, you get benched, no matter how much you're paid, no matter where you were drafted. He plays the best players, and he expects his players to execute. And you saw him wipe out all of his assistants practically because we were doing a terrible job of executing all season. And you see him not hesitating if players aren't on board with his system. And so Ajayi, which I believe this is true. We were being told that he was refusing to come off the field. Like they were trying to put in different players, and he was refusing. And he also made the point that Ajayi had no interest in trying to give up reps to Drake. He just was flat out refusing to do that. And he was worried about his own self more than the team. And you could tell when Drake's in there, those two should have probably been splitting carries, but that doesn't help, Ajayi's stat line. And so I understand why he had to be moved out. And I honestly think in the long term, the Eagles are all excited about Ajayi right now, but, they're talking about using him more. But once they get him in there, history very likely is going to repeat himself. I don't know how excited Ajayi is going to be to let another back for the Eagles cut his carries down, down the road here. And so it's one of those things that Gase is running the show, and Gase made that call. In terms of Landry, I don't think, I know they had the blow up with each other on the sideline, which you see from time to time in the NFL, but I do think Gase wanted Landry back. It was one of those cases where you just can't. The Dolphins are not in the position to pay Landry what he wanted. I think you're right. Lewis and several teams valued Landry at 10 to 11 million, but every single team is different. And the Cleveland Browns have the luxury of paying Landry, top receiver money to play the slot receiver because they have like $100 million of cap space. And so when you're a team that has that much cap space and you're like the Browns, you'll gladly pay to get Landry in there. And, they're completely rebuilding their team. And so I would say if Miami had $100 million of cap space, we probably would have Landry. But, we haven't won one game in the last 2 years and traded out of the number one slot a few times. So the Browns are where they're at because they've been so bad for the last few years, and they're just one of those teams that had the luxury to pay Landry what he wanted. But it's very clear. There were teams that I feel confident Jarvis would have rather played for. I think he would have rather played for the Panthers. I think he would have rather played for the Ravens. And those teams just couldn't justify paying him more than 10 to 11. So I think his general market was that. And, that was Landry's choice. He decided that he wanted to make as much money as possible versus maybe maximizing his opportunity to win. And maybe Cleveland will work out really well for him. I don't have any animosity towards him, but in the end, I think Gase made the call that, look, we can't afford to bring him back. He's for what he does in the offense at what he's wanting, and I do believe they'll figure out how to replace him. I don't think, Lewis. I think where we disagree is I don't think Jakeem Grant can even come close to replacing Jarvis Landry. I think Jakeem Grant's an exciting player. I just don't feel you can give him more than 5 or 6 touches a game and expect him to stay healthy. Just at his size, there's only so many shots a guy of his physical stature can absorb and stay healthy. And so you need him healthy and out in space to make some dynamic plays, and he'll be a piece to that puzzle. You'll have the luxury, probably not necessarily the luxury. You'll have the need to get the ball in Jakeem Grant's hands maybe 4 or 5 more times a game instead of Jarvis Landry's because Landry's gone. But I think the primary 2 ways the Dolphins are going to replace Landry's production is not bringing in another slot receiver they're going to feed. I really do think they're going to look at getting a talented tight end. I think Gase really loves to use the tight end in his offense. And again, I think Kenyon Drake gives them a lot more dynamic playmaking ability out of the backfield receiving than Ajayi. And so when you throw in a tight end, it's probably going to be quite a bit better than what Thomas was last year. And you throw in Kenyon Drake over Ajayi, and you throw in Jakeem Grant in a few sets in there and get the ball in his hands, suddenly you don't need to bring in a slot receiver that's going to get 12 to 15 touches a game. Your slot receiver might be getting more like 6 to 8 touches a game, and you definitely don't need a $16 million guy to be getting 6 to 8 touches a game. And there's no doubt in my mind his touches were going to go down this year in the Miami offense because you can't win. You can't win when you have one player getting the ball that much because guys like Belichick just take him away. And Miami's offense needs more diversity, and they do have the players here that are developing that can give them that diversity. So I think they'll be okay. I mean, look at the last year; they were god-awful, I thought, on offense. So, with Tannehill back and Drake, now a full year established in at running back, you have to assume whether it's in free agency or the draft, they'll get in a new tight end in here. So I'm not too worried about Jarvis Landry's production being replaced.
All right. Now I'm going to ask this because I don't know if I specifically asked this. You keep talking about how you don't think you can get Grant 5 to 6 touches a game and expect him to stay healthy. Okay. Well, then knowing how much of a dynamic playmaker he can be, how would you use Jakeem Grant?
Sorry, with Jakeem Grant, Lewis, he's a completely different player than Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry was extremely physical. I mean, you saw Jarvis Landry run over linebackers multiple times. And I tweeted out in that game against the Rams where he got pushed into the end zone, he ran over Ogletree in that trade. And I've just seen him do amazingly physical plays, break tackles, and score. And Jakeem Grant is not going to do that. And also, when you're playing the slot receiver, you are playing the middle of the field a lot. And you take some really hard shots. I just don't see Jakeem Grant, being able to sustain that abuse very long. It's like taking a light running back and slamming him up the middle. Jakeem Grant's probably not best suited to play a lot of slot receiver. What Jakeem Grant does do is he's exceptionally quick and he's exceptionally fast. So I think you can move him around in the offense, outside, inside, maybe even in the backfield, and he will naturally create mismatches with his speed. And so if you can get, again, anywhere you want to put him to get him the ball in space, that's great. But, when it's a tight game and you got to throw that guy a ball that's a 6 or 7 yard pass at the first down marker and he's going to get popped, Jakeem Grant isn't that guy that's going to get you that yak yard for the first down. That's going to have to be somebody else. And I don't know who that is. Honestly, I know a lot of people are down on him, but one thing Carew was in college is he when he was coming out, he had very good hands. He was very good at catching the ball. He's not a guy that has elite speed, but he does have very physical structure frame to him. He's a very big physical receiver with good hands. And so, when I think about Leonte Carew, he just is not designed to play the boundary. Leonte Carew can't play the boundary better than Kenny Stills or Devontae Parker, so of course he's not going to play. And if the best position he's suited for would be to move into the slot so he can catch the ball in the center of the field, how do you even get him on the field when you have Jarvis Landry on your team? And so he honestly may be the best player on the team right now to put in the middle of the field to take away some of those physical catches Landry had to do. That may be what Leandre Carew does. And when you get a mismatch, when you have a team that might have slower linebackers or slower safeties, I absolutely would get Jakeem Grant in the field and work the ball into his hands. But again, I don't see Jakeem Grant as somebody you can feed 10 passes throughout the game and in the middle of the field. He's going to get butchered on one of those by a safety that's going to be going 220 pounds. And he's just not that big. You can't let him get punished over and over and over and expect him to stay healthy. So you got to limit his touches to mismatches that you can exploit, and that's on Gase. How do you get Jakeem Grant 5 or 6 touches a game out in space? That's got to be where you start with him, and you may utilize him more in a given game than another, but that's the kind of player he is. And there's different players like that in the NFL that have been successful. That aren't 20 carry running backs, that are more like 5 or 6 carry running backs that get the ball in special situations. And Jakeem Grant, I think, will do that. I'm excited to have him back as a kick returner. Don't forget about that when you're talking about Jakeem Grant. He's extremely dangerous as a kick returner. I don't know that he'll be able to replace Landry as a punt return. Jakeem Grant does not instill confidence in me with his hands right now. He had a big drop in the Patriots game when they were featuring him last year. He's muffed several punts in his career, and when it's December and you have a game that's meaning playoffs on the line, and a team's punting the ball up into the swirling wind, how good do you feel about Jakeem Grant returning that punt? And so that's going to be another position that we're going to lose with Landry, as that was always he was the guy you felt the most comfortable putting back to return punts that wouldn't screw it up. And so I don't feel that's Jakeem Grant either. So, again, with Lewis, I'm excited about Jakeem Grant. I think they'll use him, but again, I think you're overly optimistic if you think he's going to get the ball more than 5 to 6 touches a game.
Well, then that's a shame, because I feel like they should use him a lot. But I guess that's where the whole tight end thing is. Corey McKee, with our history of injury-prone free agent tight ends, Tyler Eifert, different. My tongue is tied. He's saying Tyler Eifert would be a definite Finns move. Okay, look, Tyler Eifert. Honestly, this is what I would do if I were the Dolphins. Ready? This is going to be my big off-season advice for the Dolphins. Do nothing. Do nothing. Only cut and draft. That's it. That's what I would do if I were the Dolphins. Do nothing. And I understand that there would still be holes. But the free agents out there are not worth it. Free agency is where you get guys going into their prime or older veterans on 1-year deals. That's it. Now a lot of Dolphins fans are upset because the Dolphins keep going after injured people who are past their prime and blah, 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 blah. I get that. And they keep giving them a lot of guaranteed money. I get that. That is frustrating. That's why I'm like, if Miami wants to do stuff, do nothing. Do not try to go crazy after so-and-so person and so-and-so person. That's what I would do if I were the Dolphins. I keep saying it. They are not as far away as we think. Losing Ryan Tannehill did a lot more damage to 2017 than anybody is willing to admit. And I don't know why. It's got to be because he must be mad. It's got to be because he's not angry enough. He doesn't show his rage outwardly. He doesn't have that cocky swagger that a lot of other quarterbacks have. He's not Dan Marino. And so because he's not, there's no possible way that not having Tannehill was the reason that the Dolphins didn't do well in 2017. And that's bullcrap. It really is. Ask any team, and they will tell you they need their starting quarterback. And then you'll point at the Eagles and say, well, they had Nick Foles. Nick Foles has somehow this thing about Philadelphia. Nick Foles is probably the best backup in football right now. I don't want him starting for my football team. And whoever signs Case Keenum, by the way, to a massive contract, I guarantee you they'll regret it. I guarantee you they will regret it. So that's my thought on that. The Dolphins are not as far away as they think. If they're going to do stuff in free agency, go after the guys that you know for sure can do something for you, even if it's just a support role. Even if it's just a support role. Do not go after the flashy names. Do not go after the old and injured names. Go after solid players who can handle who can do their job just good enough to the point where we can get away with signing him for cheap. That's what I would do. And then draft solid players. And yes, I'm going to say draft for need. Yes, draft for need. Best player available is most of the time a luxury that teams that are already built can get away with. The Dolphins have a very weak offensive line. Offensive line is the one thing year in and year out that we constantly complain is not working. Offensive line is the position that we constantly say is the reason the Dolphins don't do well every year. So what do we do about the offensive line? Nothing. We do nothing. And why do we do nothing? I don't know. Because it's not flashy, because it's not sexy, because it's not something that we enjoy seeing. It's something that we think, well, they have a bunch of first-round draft picks on the offensive line. It should be working, and doggone it, we're going to make it work. No. First-round draft picks mean nothing. Just like quarterbacks who are drafted in the first round can be busts, so can be offensive linemen. Or they can get hurt, like Mike Pouncey, and they're not as effective as they used to be. So you have Mike Pouncey, who is injured and has bad hips, and he'll probably never go back to being the Mike Pouncey of old. You have Laramie Tunsil, who I still think can be a really good left tackle, but that's only one guy. We don't have a left guard. We don't have a right guard because Bushrod's is gone. So you could either put Jesse Davis there, or you could move into right tackle because Juwan James is probably going to be gone. So right now we only have 3 offensive linemen, and that's about it. We don't even have that many reserve guys. So if I'm Miami, I'm drafting offensive line and also linebacker because we need that too. This team is not that far away, but you need the draft for need. Fill those holes with solid players. Use your first rounder on a linebacker and take care of that issue. Or draft a top guard and take care of that issue. Make it so that Ryan Tannehill has a wall in front of him, just like Tom Brady. Everybody remembers 2014 when everybody was talking about, has Tom Brady finally met the end of his career? Because the first 4 games of that season, Tom Brady looked slow, he looked old, he looked vulnerable for the first time in his career. Why? Probably because Dante Scarnecchia skipped town and decided he was ready to end his career as an offensive line coach, and the offensive line suffered for it. And then they got their act together, and Tom Brady looked like a star again. So, what's the key? Offensive line. Must fix. Must have wall. Tom Brady has his great wall of Foxborough. Ryan Tannehill needs his great wall of Davie. Or his great wall of Miami or South Beach. And then suddenly everything will get better. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you it'll get better. Because games are won in the trenches. They just are. That's what I would do. Don't go crazy looking for weapons. Don't go crazy looking for superstar names or names that gets people excited. If you want PR, win. How do you win? Trenches. How do you beat the trenches? Invest in offensive line and keep investing on that offensive line until you have something that works. People are bringing up that the Miami Dolphins should have done like Sashi Brown and the Browns. I don't want to do what the Browns did. Do you know what the Browns did? And are probably still going to do, despite everything we think right now? The Browns were, year in and year out, the worst team in football. The worst team in football. That's what we want the Browns. That's what we want to do with our off seasons. The Browns have tons of draft picks to play with. The Browns have tons of cap space to play with. And right now they're making trades left and right, trying to supposedly improve so that they don't go 0-16 again. We thought the Browns were going to be majorly improved last year because of the same thing that we're saying that they can do now. Last year, they had a ton of draft picks and cap space to play with. And they drafted a lot of talented players. And what did it amount to? Nothing. 0-16. I don't want to do what the Browns did. Jacksonville got lucky. Jacksonville was building a roster for years, and it worked out for them. And they still have cap space and draft picks to play with. Good for them. The only thing holding them back was Blake Bortles. But it's not that easy to do that. We assume that if we have a ton of cap space and a bunch of draft picks, that suddenly we'll be able to turn a team around in 1 year. Cleveland's been trying this for the past 5, and they still can't get it done. So, if I'm the Dolphins, I'm not doing the aggressive offseason again. But that's how they do things, so my opinion really doesn't matter in this regard. Sorry, Chad, I kind of left you out in the cold here. I kind of went on a little rant. I apologize for that.
Well, I mean, I understand your points, Lewis. Miami's in a difficult position right now because they've got money and players like Rashad Jones and Ndamukong Suh and Cameron Wake right now, and it doesn't make any sense at all to go get Robert Quinn if you're not planning on trying to make a run at the playoffs. And that's to me, that's what they're trying to do. Are they that far away or not? I don't think any team in the NFL ever is that far away anymore because the league is so close. Miami doesn't have the luxury to do nothing right now because they're missing a ton of starters. Juwan James is going. We don't have a starting right tackle or a starting right guard. That has to be addressed. It can be done in 2 ways. You can draft 3 ways. Forgive me. You can draft an offensive tackle in this draft. And I think you could probably, in this draft, maybe get away with getting one in the second round. I think that's possible. You could draft Quentin Nelson with the 11th overall pick. That's a very strong possibility that would give you the best rated rookie in the draft to come in and play guard. I think he's almost a blue chip. You can insert him in right away and feel good about him being a guard. Or you can maybe make a run and spend the money on Norwell from the Panthers, who is another very highly rated guard. One way or the other, Jesse Davis is either going to be your right guard or your right tackle. So you've got to get that starter. They have no starting tight end right now. And so they're going to have to either draft a tight end or sign a tight end. There are some attractive names, but I think your logic fits on this one, Lewis. They've swung and missed twice now. They went and they got Cameron Jordan, who was supposed to be a really good athletic tight end, and he did really nothing.
Jordan Cameron.
Sorry, Jordan. Get him back.
Yeah, I know. Everybody does that. It drives Cameron nuts. It's like, no, I'm not Cameron Jordan.
Jordan Cameron, forgive me, didn't really do anything for the Dolphins other than give them no starting tight end for a couple years. And so then they brought in Julius Thomas because he had the success with Gase in Denver. And it just was obvious that he didn't have it anymore. It just didn't appear that quick to me. He didn't appear to even be in very good shape to me. So there's 3 years now running that Miami has failed trying to bring in a name at tight end. So I'm not excited at all to bring in like Tyler Eifert or maybe Eric Ebron or these former number 1 picks who a few years ago had some good careers, but as of late, they just haven't done that much. I think the Dolphins have got to invest in the first 3 rounds in a tight end. I think that's just where they're at right now, and that's got to be one of those picks. So I feel that's the position they need to address in the draft, and I think they need to address quarterback in this draft. I think that's the most important position. So that's where I'm at right now. Free agency wise, they've got to re-sign. They've got to get a kicker. We don't have a kicker under contract right now. We've got to re-sign Cody Parkey, who's going to command a much better contract after last year. We've got to sign a starting linebacker who I would like to do in the draft. But if you're going to go get your quarterback, you may have to consider free agency, is where you're going to get your linebackers. So I'm hearing you, Lewis, but I think Miami probably has got to commit 3 or 4 starting spots right now in free agency.
I know. Dude, I feel like really what this boils down to is that a lot of people just feel like the Dolphins can do no right. The Dolphins can do no right. Everything that they do is wrong. Everything that they do is awful. And it gets frustrating to a point. It's hard to stay a fan. It's like, what would you like to be able to do? Just kind of cut out your fandom, never watch again, do something else with your Sundays until Mike Tannenbaum is gone? You can't. That's no way to live or watch football. That's just awful. If that's the case, then you might as well become like a basketball fan and just follow LeBron James around. Just be a LeBron fan. Don't even bother being a fan of the team. Just as soon as LeBron ships out of Cleveland, which he probably will, just go be a fan of that team instead. You might as well become fans of players, because if you really feel that your team is that bad, then don't even bother. It's hard to maintain a strong sense of fandom, because if you feel like the Dolphins can't do anything right, and I'm not going to stand here and say that, oh, people are being too judgmental necessarily, because a lot of the stuff the Dolphins do, I would disagree with. But a lot of times what happens is that it's not as bad as we think it is.
I don't think it's that bad, Lewis. I mean, I think right now our defense, I feel really good about where our defense is at. I like that we've got 2 good young corners. I'm really hopeful.
3 if you count Lippett.
Well, I would say I'm hoping he returns to form. That will give us 3, good young boundary corners. I feel good about, obviously Rashad Jones is a beast, and I like TJ McDonald. He gives us a good veteran to match up with Rashad Jones, which we haven't had, for here. It always seems like whoever that veteran is, they end up getting hurt. But I'm hoping that we get a solid season on TJ McDonald. But, with bringing in Robert Quinn, we absolutely should be able to rush the passer, with him adding into that mix. And assuming we're keeping Sue, which I absolutely don't believe we're going to cut or trade Sue, we should have a pretty good defensive line. We're really just one really good linebacker away from having a pretty solid defense. I don't feel that bad. And, despite what everybody thinks about Ryan Tannehill, to me, he's a massive upgrade over Jay Cutler. I saw one season of Jay Cutler, and all I could say is I felt really sorry for his Chicago fans after watching him for a year with the Dolphins. So I think the team as a whole is going to be better. It's just one of those things right now where everybody's very, very negative because you're seeing, some of the players go, and you have a lot of uncertainty with the holes that have to be filled. But, I'm with you, Lewis. I'm pretty optimistic. I think if we had Ryan Tannehill this year, we would have probably been 8-8, 9-7, and probably right into the playoff run, not too dissimilar from where we were last year. And getting Tannehill back is going to be huge. And I think the other biggest impact you're going to see on this year is if we get a decent tight end. Really, Adam Gase loves to use the tight end in his offense, and he has not been given a tight end since he's been here. So,
well, let's just for the record say Corey McKee mentioning in the chat, Gase likes AJ Derby. Yes, I know he likes AJ Derby, but I don't know if he likes him enough to say that he's the guy.
No, I don't think so. I think I don't have a preference. This is a good tight end draft. We've had some weak tight end drafts in recent years, and I think Miami's scouting department has some guys pegged pretty strongly around the 3rd round that we're going to get. I think that's where our tight end is going to come from. He's going to be drafted around the 3rd round. I think that 1st round pick, I honestly think we're going quarterback, Lewis, depending on who falls. I don't think we're going to move up, but I think we're going to go quarterback within the first, the latest, the 2nd round. And I really feel like if you're asking my prognosticator, I don't think we're targeting Baker Mayfield. I don't know what we'll do if he's there in the 11th round. With the 11th overall pick. I don't know if they'll take Mayfield or not there, but I don't expect him to be there anyway. There's just too many teams that need quarterbacks. But my gut feeling is Miami's targeting a guy like Lamar Jackson. I really feel that's who they are targeting, to be honest. I don't know if they'll take him with the 11th overall pick, but I honestly feel he's the most talented overall quarterback of the group. He's just the least pro-ready of the top guys. I think people are going to view Rosen and Darnold as guys that you're going to start this year. I think people will view Mayfield as somebody you can start this year. So those are going to be the 3 quarterbacks chased. I don't think that Josh Allen is somebody that you can start this year, but he probably has the most physical gifts. I think he had the best looking arm in the combine. Granted, Darnold didn't throw, but I think Lamar Jackson's under the radar right now, and he's just easy to forget how much he dominated college football with his legs. And if you can develop the rest of his game, that's my prediction on where Miami's looking at the quarterback position. So I think that 11th overall pick is going there. If not, I'd love to have Roquan Smith or Edmonds, either one of those linebackers. I'd love to have Quentin Nelson. We're going to get a good player at 11 regardless, unless we trade back. But I expect the draft to give us a quarterback. I expect the draft to give us a tight end, and I expect to get some depth in there. We've got to get another starting running back, and that's another player I don't like fulfilling in free agency. I know Anderson is floating around out there from Denver, but I don't know, Lewis. I don't know if I'm feeling it as him to be the complement to Kenyon Drake, and Adam Gase kind of gave us a little insight in his press conference that he seemed like he was more looking for a guy that could duplicate what Kenyon Drake does. He didn't sound to me like he was looking for a 240-pound back to pound in for a 1 to 2 yard gain on the goal line. It looked like he wanted another Kenyon Drake type player. And so you got to look at, one of our 3rd or 4th round picks going to running back. And so I think in free agency, we're going to have to look at offensive linemen. And I think we're going to have to look at getting some quality depth in after the draft. That's going to be the key to this team right now, is how they fill the line out. Are we going to get Michael Thomas back? It didn't sound like he was coming back. So we need to get a third safety that we feel good about playing in the free agency somewhere after all the money's been spent and the bargains are out there. We've got to get maybe a quality backup offensive tackle, that's a bargain out there that is a Sam Young type player from last year. That's where it's going to be won or lost, because we can't expect everybody to stay healthy. And this team not only is lacking starters, they're lacking depth. And we have to do all of that with, basically having the normal number of draft picks right now and not having that much money to spend in free agency. So it's going to be a real interesting few weeks to see what Greer and Tannenbaum have planned right now, because I don't see any easy options to get this team to where they need to be talent-wise to be a playoff contender this coming year at all those positions. And it's really going to put a lot on Tannehill's shoulders. Can he have a really good year, because they're desperately going to need it.
Yeah, so I think we're going to go ahead and start to wrap the show up. But first, I want to get to the questions that are in the chat, because I know there's a few of them there. And thank you guys for being patient. Again, McLaren 08. Are we cutting Sue? Seems not likely since we just got the DL coach from the Lions. I'm just going to go ahead and say no, they're not cutting Sue. Because cutting Sue.
100% agree. 100% agree.
No way. With all that dead cap that's attached to him, even after post-June 1st, no way. They're not going to cut Sue. Let's see.
Let me just before I go on, let me add to that, Lewis. They're absolutely not going to cut Sue. One thing I think that would be a big mistake is to push Sue's contract to open cap space up. I don't think they want to do that again. Next year, Miami will get a lot more flexibility with Sue. For his last year of his contract, if Miami wants out, they can get out next year without it being so crippling in the dead money. And so you may see them consider that next year, but you have to consider, how much cap space is Miami really saving if they let Sue go, and you got to look at the hole you create. I mean, do you really feel like Phillips and Godchow are going to give us a dominant defensive tackle tandem coming into this year if you pull Sue out of the mix? I just don't see that. I think if you get rid of Ndamukong and Sue, then you've got to look at bringing in another free agent, and defensive tackles are very expensive. Who are you going to go sign at a reasonable rate if you let Sue go? Or you got to use up, if you want to get Vay in the draft, that's what you're going to do. Great, but now you've used up your number one pick. So where's your linebacker? Where's your line help? Where's your backup quarterback help? There's just so many holes, and just dumping Sue does nothing but leave a gaping hole right in the center of our defense. So I'm with you on that, Lewis. I don't think there's hardly any chance that Miami would get rid of Ndamukong and Sue. And the only possible way Ndamukong and Sue is not playing on this team this year is if they traded him, and you would have to get a pretty good compensation. And to me, you have to get a number one practically with him so that you can draft a D tackle to replace him. So I think there's almost no chance Sue's going anywhere.
Yeah, and just for the record, I just checked over the cap, and the best year to get rid of Sue would actually be 2020, not 2019, because in 2020, that is the last year of his deal, and that would give the Dolphins $18 million in cap savings and $4 million and only $4 million in dead money. That's the sad thing, is that the way this contract works is that no matter which year you get rid of him, there's going to be dead money. There's no get out of jail free card.
No, you're right, Lewis, but next year they'll have more flexibility because you can do a post-June cut next year, and you can tolerably cut him if you really need to. But I guess my question is I've seen this being everywhere reported. Miami screwed up giving Ndamukong Suh that contract. He's way overpaid. And I look at Ndamukong Suh and I'm thinking he's played the last 3 years at a Pro Bowl level. He plays way more snaps than an average D tackle plays because he's in such good physical shape for a D tackle. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, at what point has Ndamukong Suh been the problem for this football team? He's been nothing but a really solid defensive tackle for us, and they paid top dollars for one of the best. And so what I don't want to see, what's bad is when you sign somebody like Ndamukong Suh, and then the first year of his contract, he severely hurts his knee, and he's never going to be the same player again, and you've got all that dead money into him, and you're never going to have the player. So with Ndamukong Suh, to me, we've got a lot of what we paid for. We've got a very talented D tackle that's played a lot of snaps for us, and so I'm in no hurry to run our better players out of town. And we just lost our slot receiver, and so we want to turn around and get rid of our best defensive tackle. Just not something I see as a great move if we're trying to get back to winning football games.
Exactly. And the other thing going on is that they want Derek Carosa wants Trey Burton. Again, that's a free agent, and I understand that he's technically coming into his prime, and he's not the expensive guy like Jimmy Graham or Tyler Eifert. But actually, the argument going on in the chat right now is that a lot of people are looking at Trey Burton, and that's going to bump his price up, which I believe is the case. I believe Trey Burton is not exactly going to go cheap. I don't think he's going to break the bank because, as far as I know, he didn't do a lot in Philly. I'd have to actually check it out and see what his actual stats were. I don't remember him. So now, is he going to be a number one tight end? I don't know. I'd have to watch him play because I haven't really watched the Eagles beyond the Super Bowl. So that's something we're going to have to look at. Lamar Miller will be back as a backup. Please no. Please no. I don't want Lamar back. I don't want Lamar Miller back, especially not if we have to pay him. I would much rather just draft a guy.
As I kind of mentioned, earlier, I'm against filling our tight end spot and our backup running spot in free agency. I think those should be filled through the draft, and the reason is this is a deep draft for running backs, and it's also a deep draft for tight ends. You can get a very good tight end right now in the second or third round, in my opinion, in this draft, and I think that's what Miami will do. I think they'll fill their tight end and running back positions somewhere between the second and fourth rounds of this draft, and so I'm much more feeling if I'm going to fill a hole, the guy I would probably be chasing the most if I'm going to spend money in free agency is Norwell from Carolina. We absolutely need a good starting lineman, and I'm just not excited. I like Quentin Nelson. He's a great-looking prospect. I'm just not feeling excited to use the 11th overall pick in the draft to get a guard. I have a tough time with that, again, with all the needs we have. I really think you got to chase the quarterback with that 11th round pick. And if you can't get the quarterback, then yeah, of course, get a blue chip player with the 11th pick because they'll be there. If either we're going to have a shot at one of the top quarterbacks, or one of the blue chip players are going to fall. There's 5 or 6 players in this draft that are very good prospects that I'll be fine if we do that. But I think offensive line is something we're going to – I know you don't want to do that, Lewis, but I think offensive line may be best filled in the draft. And with Landry now gone, that does open the door that maybe they'll just keep Juwan James, another year. And I think that's potentially, not a bad idea to bring James back as our right tackle. I know he's never going to be a dominant Pro Bowl tackle, but he was a hell of a lot better than the few years we went before we drafted him when we were just bringing in free agents that couldn't get the job done. And so you either keep James or try to get somebody like Norrell, and then you can focus your draft pick on tight end, running back, backup quarterback, and hopefully when you get past that fourth round area into the fifth and sixth rounds, we can actually still get players that can be, our number 3 safety and maybe a backup linebacker, a backup offensive lineman. I'm hoping we can do that again this year, as we've done in the last couple of years, and have some success in that range.
I hope so too, Chad. Gase, Derek Carosa again. Gase doesn't waste capital, big free agent dollars on guards. Yeah, I know. And that's why I don't think Norwell's going to happen. That's simply because they've said over and over and over again that Gase does not want to spend a lot of investment on offensive line, which probably is my biggest gripe with him. I don't know if maybe Jeremiah Washburn can turn around and turn some of these lower talented guys or lower projected guys into stars, but we'll see. I hope that Washburn is just the guy to do the job. I can only hope. I don't think it's going to happen, but we'll see. I feel like if you want,
he's going to be much better than Forrester.
That's a given. That's a given. But anyway, so I think that's going to wrap it up. I don't know. I just want to see this team win. Tired of losing. Yes, Corey McKee, I agree. I would love to see them win. So hopefully that'll be the case. You never know with the NFL, guys. You never know. Some guy out of nowhere might show up and become a superstar overnight. You never know with the NFL. You see guys jumping up over all the time. So we'll see. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you all so much for joining us. A lot of Landry talk and a lot of stuff regarding Landry and how this affects the team going forward. It's going to be pretty hectic in the next few days, I think. I think that once Wednesday rolls around and free agent officially begins, the new league year begins, we're probably going to see the cut of Timmons and Thomas because the Dolphins have to be under the cap by that time. So a lot of people are saying that maybe the Dolphins should go get Sammy Watkins. Well, let's just put it to you this. I'll just put it to you this way. If I had the choice between Landry at $14 million and Sammy Watkins at something like 11 or 12, I'm taking Sammy Watkins. I don't know if you would agree with that or not, Chad, but that's my ethic.
No, I believe Sammy Watkins is a more explosive player than Jarvis Landry. I'm a little nervous about giving him a lot of money because he's had a lot of difficulty staying healthy, and that's the one thing Landry always was ready to play. And
But could you imagine Watkins, Stills, Grant, and Parker?
No, I'm all for it. It's just there's cheaper ways to fill your slot receiver position right now. And as I was mentioning, I think it's more important to get a very good tight end right now to work Drake in, to try to fill some of those touches that Landry was getting and just get a slot receiver. So I'm open to Watkins if you can get him at 10 or 11. I don't think you can. I think he's going to get more than that in the open market. And I honestly
if it's a one-year deal, we'll see.
We'll see. I honestly expect him to end up staying with the Rams. I think he's going to test the market to see what he gets offered, and the Rams will, may take a hard look at just paying him that. I think that's where he's going to want to be, and he's happy there. And they're a very up-and-coming team right now. So I don't see Watkins leaving there unless he gets paid a huge contract. I don't think he jumped to Miami from the Rams, right away. So there's some talent in there in the free agency market. I don't have any problem with filling the slot receiver, but if you're bringing in a slot receiver free agency, you've got to feel like they're going to bring a lot more than using what we have in house. And I'm not disagreeing with you, Lewis. I do want to see what Ford can do. I want to see if we can get the ball in Grant's hands more, and I want to see what Carew can do in the middle of the field without Landry there. And you got to feel pretty strongly that any free agent that you bring in is going to be better than those guys. And so it's a lower priority thing. Despite losing a huge part of our offense in Jarvis Landry, I'm much more concerned right now of making sure we get our offensive line fixed. I'm much more concerned about making sure we get a good linebacker. And, if we want to consistently get good, again, if you have a conviction on one of these quarterbacks, and we have the moves to get him, even if we have to move up, if Adam Gase really wants Baker Mayfield, if that's his guy, or if Rosen's his guy, whoever that is, I'm telling Tannenbaum and Greer, that is the priority of this draft above all else, is get me this quarterback. And so I want to have two good quarterbacks because, whether or not we have the luxury of doing that. I just don't think you have a choice. I would rather have a losing season this year but get a franchise quarterback for the next decade than just skip out on getting that quarterback. And, I think Tannehill's decent, but it's only every few years you have a shot to get a really good quarterback. And this is the first time Miami's had a shot to get a really good quarterback since they grabbed Tannehill. So I just don't think you pass that up.
All right, then. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. And I'm not just saying that because my voice is fried. So thank you all so much for joining us. I really appreciate the input you all give during the show. And again, like always, we take callers for these shows. So if you ever want to go ahead and call in, you can do that. And we always appreciate your inputs using the hashtag PhinManiacs Live. We'll be back next week. And who knows? Maybe the Dolphins will make another move to give us all heart attacks, and we can argue over that. So anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. And for myself and my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum, we will see you all next time.